Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com. Hey guys, back again with some more talking head videos for the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. So, just my little stupid phone here. Happy anniversary to me. So today is the 10th anniversary of me entering the legal distilling industry. So 10 years ago today, I started off at Copper and Kings. I'd been distilling obviously for quite some time before that, but that was my first foray into legal large-scale distilling. And let me tell you what, between me and the other guy that was there at the time, there couldn't have been two dumber fucking people that you could have turned loose with a large-scale pot still distillery with a steam boiler, a 1,000-gallon still and a 750-gallon still and several thousand gallons of product in the entire world. They literally told us, you know, about all the things. Hey, go and figure it out. And I'll be damned if we didn't figure it out. And thank God we did too, because it's led me into a career that I love, despite the stresses of that career to some degree. And to this day, that same gentleman is down there at that Kentucky Brandy Distillery there in Louisville, Kentucky, and we've both had some wonderful milestones. We've both managed to stay within the industry, which really on the face of it is quite surprising. I mean, he and I, in our careers, our 10 years alone, have seen a lot of people come and go. And we've heard a lot of people say, man, I'm really dedicated to this. This is really what I want to do. It's really what I want to learn. But they don't stick around. They don't have the stick-to-itiveness, right? They just don't. So many people say, I want to be a distiller, and they don't really put the time and effort, knowledge, and love into it. But that's neither here nor there. Today, also letting you guys know that the Distiller's Almanac is available. So this is not something to replace the Farmer's Almanac. This is something in addition to the Old Farmer's or the Farmer's Almanac that you get that will explain some of the signs that I distill under, plus some folk magic from powwow traditions brought here from people from Pennsylvania, and folk magic from some of the cunning folk magic that came through Appalachia. So Appalachian style folk magic that's still practiced here, or was practiced here when I was a kid in southern Indiana. Me and my wife, of course, still practice that way. A lot of distilling information in there, some good measures and tables and stuff like that. This is something we'll be doing every single year and adding more to. Year one, it was a little hard to put together because I don't know how to put together an almanac, and I knew just enough about astrology to be able to do what I wanted to do. But now I've done a deep dive on it, so next year's is going to be even better. But get your copies. We are going to limit that to some degree. You know, it'll only be offered for so long. I can't remember how long Kim said she'd keep it up. But it will be a yearly installment that we do, you know, every single year. A Distiller's Almanac will come out, sponsored by If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything podcast and the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. So make sure you pick that up at thealchemistcabinet.com. Anyways, we're going to jump into some questions here and see what we got going on. So from Terry, so maybe a dumb question, but I got to ask, does the Yellow Label Angel Yeast impart bad flavors? I'm hearing yes and no, and honestly, I've got some ferments happening with it now, and I'll find out soon enough. But how much of a difference do you believe it makes? Also, I've noticed taste profile. I like from Bob's Red Mill active dry yeast and have good results with it. I like to experiment, and one experiment I have going now was a simple cornmeal mash that I allowed to ferment dry, and then added Yellow Label yeast to see if there were possibly any unconverted starches that could be converted, and it is currently fermenting again. Do you think there would be any advantage to pitching both yeasts in at the same time to see if it would increase the yield? Thanks for any info or thoughts on the matter. And these are great questions, and I've talked about the Angel Yellow yeast, the Yellow Label yeast on here. I'll get that out eventually. Yellow Label yeast on this channel many times before. As far as off flavors, so all the products I've used it for, honestly, are double pot distilled or pot thump and then pot again distilled, so triple distilled. And all of them have been for maturation and bad motivator or 1030 barrels. Great products, by the way. Go get you some, guys. So I wasn't making white spirit to make white spirit with Angel Yellow Label. Off the top of my head, and bear in mind that you're cutting a brown spirit that you're going to age much differently than you cut a white spirit. I can't remember anything off-putting about the Angel. I don't remember it really contributing much of any flavor or characteristic of its own accord as a yeast, which typically I like to use yeast to add a lot of flavor. I'm a big believer in Fleischmann's, I'm a big believer in Red Star. Baking yeast, I love the grain forward flavor that they bring. I love wild yeast. I collect yeast. You guys know all this stuff. You know how it works. I like POF positive yeast, things that really do affect flavor. I don't remember the Angel having that much of an effect on flavor, truthfully, but again, I did not cut that as a white spirit. If I would suspect that it's either fairly neutral or probably, if it's not neutral, I'll put it this way. I don't know that it's something I would use for a white product, just in general. Even if it is fairly neutral, I think there's better choices out there for unaged spirits as far as yeast goes. So I don't know how much stock I'd put into using it for a white spirit when there's so many other better options out there. Now, in terms of, first of all, I've never used the Red Mill active dry yeast. I'm going to have to look for that and give it a try. I like bread yeast quite a bit, as many of you know. As far as, so it says you did the sugar shine here basically with the corn, and then allowed it to ferment dry, and then added yellow label yeast to see if there were possibly any unconverted starches. So yeah, if you didn't do a safety net or something like that where you cooked your corns to start with, there's definitely starches there. Do I think it would be worthwhile yield wise to pitch both yeasts? Yeah, potentially. Now, I don't know how high alcohol the Angel yeast will go to. So, and bear in mind that it's making alcohol as it goes, so it doesn't make it all at once. But it would be a great way to get higher yields between adding your sugar and then also having the Angel yellow label there to convert that sugar. One of the other things that you could potentially do is make your sugar shine. Of course, leave your grain bed in the bottom of the barrel, run your mash off, and then sour mash back onto that grain with your hot liquid. Let that set until it cools off, then pitch the Angel. Let the Angel actually break down the starches that were never converted from the corn in the first place, and then redistill that. So be able to have both a sugar shine and an all grain off one run, which both should have fantastic flavors to them. I would see no reason why that wouldn't work, and that's something I hadn't thought of until you just mentioned it, for sure. So that would be worth playing with. Absolutely. So we got time for more questions here, so I'm gonna see if I can't find us another one, and I hope I answered that question sufficiently. I'm a little tired today. It's been a long day. I hadn't been drinking for quite some time, and had some good friends stop by the distillery today, and I had a couple of little sips, not much, but man, when you don't drink for a while, this stuff will lay into you a little bit. And to tell you, I didn't get drunk, didn't even really get buzzed. I got tired, and then I got a sinus headache on top of it. So a little worn down right now. You can hear my daughter out there coughing. She's got a little bit of a cold, and yeah, wintertime. So hey, Alan, hope all is well. Hoping you can help me understand something. I asked this on the ADI forums, but I didn't get an answer. ADI is the American Distilling Institute, for those of you who do not know that. So I crunch all the numbers on the Crampton and Tolman papers, and I see that the average ratio for rye is 85 rye, 15 malted barley, and bourbons, 75 corn, 13 rye, 11% malted barley. But when I run the DP on those mash bills, they are severely lacking in diastatic power needed to convert the mash. Using modern DP numbers, you'd need closer to 25% 6-row malt to get full conversion. So my question is, how were they getting proper conversion if they weren't using exogenous enzymes? This is a great question, one I've answered several times in different forums and also talked about in my books. The biggest difference between pre-prohibition bourbons and whiskeys and modern whiskeys is that rarely, if ever, and I mean very rarely, were the fermentations for distillation efficient. There was almost always starch left behind. They typically were not shooting for high ABVs, and even the ABVs that they were shooting for, their specific gravities they were shooting for, let's say they were shooting for an ABV based off specific gravity of around 7 or 8%, they were probably actually producing closer to 4 or 5% alcohol. Now, some of that was done because they didn't have the proper malts on hand, or because they didn't use enough of that malt, or because they didn't necessarily know what they were doing. But the bigger part of it was done because they knew exactly what they were doing. And they knew that those starchy compounds, while they don't distill over, they create aromatic principles during the fermentation and during the distillation that do carry over to the distilled spirit and give the perception of flavor through our perception of aroma. About 90% of what you taste in a spirit, you're not actually tasting. It's all about this sensory organ up here. It's all about the nose. And these old-time distillers, they knew that. And they knew that leaving some of that starch behind made a better product. They also knew that anytime that you drop below 1.000 specific gravity, for better or worse, what you do often with exogenous enzymes, you are converting starches that would never, even at almost full conversion rates using malt and alpha and beta amylase from malt, would never otherwise convert, right? This is the reason why at my current distillery, if I use exogenous enzymes for a product, we don't use them at full 100% efficiency. We want some of that starchiness and some of that character to carry across. The way that they got around wasting anything was by doing the old-fashioned sour mash method, obviously, which what you're essentially doing is not only heat reclamation and fixing your pH, but also adding dead yeast cells in to get the yeast up and going from that soured mash, that spent mash, but also reusing some amount of that starch that was unconverted in that next distillation, right? The other thing that's not well understood is that, for example, in those papers, you mentioned the rye and the 15% malt. So raw rye, not all varieties, specifically old varieties of rye, and I've done this experiment a couple times, have some amount of their own enzymes, both alpha and beta. It doesn't have to be malted. It will convert without malt, although it won't do so well. It is entirely possible to convert, or not to convert, but to use raw rye that has its own enzymes. So if the raw rye has its own enzymes, has a lower cooking temperature of 170, and it also has 15% malted barley, you're going to get pretty good conversion. Now, also understand, you mentioned 6-row barley in this. At that time, pre-prohibition, there was very little 6-row barley around. It was almost always 2-row barley, so the DP is immediately lower. You are correct in that most of the traditional mash bills, and I don't remember what you said the reference in the papers was, let me look here. Most of the traditional mash bills were much higher malt than what modern mash bills are. So you got 75 corn, 13 rye, 11 malt. I would say that that was a rarity, especially prior to 1900. Most of the mash bills I've seen prior to 1900 are running closer to 15 to 20, 25% malt sometimes. So definitely in that 15 to 20 for sure, very, very commonly. I would have to go back and look at the papers to figure out what distilleries are running at 75, 13, 11, but it really wasn't as common as I think it's being made out to be. Now, understand too that the distilleries that they had most access to for that paperwork are going to be distilleries that were part of the Whiskey Trust. So the Whiskey Trust had access to exogenous enzymes in the 1800s that they were deriving from koji culture from one of their distilleries up in Illinois, who they brought in a specialist for. That is not a ghost. That was my dog walking through the door, just so you're aware. So bear that in mind, that those Whiskey Trust recipes are going to reflect the fact that the Whiskey Trust had those sorts of abilities at that time. So anyways, I hope that answered your question. Guys, as always, if you have questions, reach out to me, bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, thealchemistcabinet.com, social media comments, or the YouTube comments below. Please like and share this video. And hey, if you're at all interested in the paranormal, at all, even just a little bit, go listen to the If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything podcast over on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm really trying to make my spirituality and my research a bigger part of what I do in general. And there are a lot of distilling related paranormal stories. Also, if you have paranormal stories, reach out to me. I would love to have you on the show. If you don't want to come on the show, send me your stories. I will narrate them and put them on the show. I could really use your help promoting that show. If you don't mind to copy the link and paste it to social media. I share it to Facebook all the time. The problem is, for some reason, Facebook does not allow that link on my Facebook page to be shared to your page. So it has somewhat destroyed my algorithm on that show, which really pisses me off because I put a lot of time and effort into that show. But any help there would be greatly appreciated. Check out the Distiller's Almanac. I love y'all, and I will catch you soon.